The way you speak to yourself establishes the framework through which you interpret every experience, opportunity, and challenge you encounter. Before any action is taken, a sentence has already been spoken internally, defining what you believe is possible, necessary, or worth the effort. This internal dialogue operates continuously, shaping your perception long before logic or emotion enter the conversation, quietly determining the direction of your choices. Every decision you make is filtered through this inner voice, whether you are aware of it or not. When self-talk is filled with hesitation, justification, or doubt, decisions tend to favor safety over growth and familiarity over progress. On the other hand, when the internal language is decisive and forward-focused, your choices naturally align with momentum, responsibility, and intentional movement. Behavior is not driven by motivation alone, it is driven by instruction, and self-talk is the instruction manual you follow every day. What you repeatedly tell yourself becomes the rules you live by, guiding how much effort you apply, how quickly you recover from setbacks, and how willing you are to persist when discomfort arises. The body responds to the commands of the mind, not to external encouragement. Long-term results are rarely the outcome of single dramatic actions, but the accumulation of small behaviors repeated consistently over time. Those repeated behaviors originate from repeated internal messages, forming habits that either compound progress or reinforce stagnation. Self-talk determines whether consistency feels natural or forced, sustainable or exhausting. When self-talk frames challenges as threats, the nervous system reacts with avoidance and hesitation. When it frames challenges as assignments, the mind engages problem solving and adaptability. This shift in language changes how pressure is processed, influencing whether stress becomes a trigger for retreat or a signal to elevate performance. Self-talk also defines your tolerance for discomfort, effort, and delayed gratification. If the internal voice prioritizes ease and immediate relief, long-term goals remain theoretical rather than lived. When the internal narrative emphasizes growth, responsibility, and execution, discomfort becomes part of the process rather than a reason to stop. The stories you tell yourself about your identity, who you are, what you deserve, and what you are capable of become self-fulfilling patterns. Actions naturally align with identity, meaning you do not rise to the level of your goals, but default to the level of your internal self-definition expressed through language. Repeated self-talk builds emotional familiarity, making certain behaviors feel normal and others feel foreign. Procrastination, discipline, confidence, and hesitation are all reinforced through the language used to justify or challenge them internally. Over time, these patterns become automatic, operating with little conscious effort. Your inner dialogue influences how you interpret feedback, failure, and success. Critical self-talk magnifies mistakes and minimizes progress, leading to discouragement and withdrawal. Constructive self-talk extracts lessons, maintains momentum, and preserves belief even when outcomes fall short of expectations. Ultimately, self-talk is the silent architect of your life, shaping how you think, act, and persist long before results appear. The quality of your internal conversation determines the quality of your standards, and those standards quietly dictate the trajectory of your behavior, decisions, and long-term results. Weak language subtly trains the mind to accept restriction as normal and hesitation as reasonable. Phrases filled with doubt, excuses, or conditional commitment signal to the brain that effort is optional and outcomes are uncertain. Over time, this language lowers internal expectations, making inaction feel justified and struggle feel unnecessary. When language becomes soft, vague, or defensive, it creates psychological permission to retreat. Words like maybe, I'll try, or if possible reduce urgency and dilute responsibility. The mind responds by conserving energy rather than mobilizing it, reinforcing patterns of delay and avoidance. Limiting language also shapes emotional responses before action begins. By labeling challenges as overwhelming or unfair, the internal dialogue amplifies fear and stress. The body reacts accordingly, prioritizing comfort and protection rather than execution, even when the task itself is within reach. Intentional language operates differently by providing clear instruction and direction. Decisive words eliminate ambiguity and communicate certainty, telling the mind exactly what is expected. This clarity removes unnecessary negotiation, making action feel like a requirement rather than an option. When language is intentional, it frames effort as non-negotiable and progress as assumed. Statements that emphasize commitment over mood create consistency, allowing behavior to remain stable regardless of emotional fluctuation. Confidence grows not from perfect outcomes, but from repeated follow-through. Strong language also redefines the relationship with fear and difficulty. Instead of labeling them as obstacles, intentional wording positions them as signals of growth and expansion. This reframing trains the mind to associate discomfort with progress rather than failure. The brain responds to language as command, not commentary. What is stated repeatedly becomes internal expectation, shaping posture, focus, and energy. Intentional words activate a sense of authority over one's actions, increasing willingness to move forward without external validation. Over time, language patterns harden into belief systems. Weak language cements narratives of limitation and dependence, while intentional language builds identity around capability and self-trust. These beliefs then guide behavior automatically, reducing the need for constant motivation. Intentional language also sharpens decision-making by eliminating hesitation. Clear internal commands reduce mental clutter and preserve cognitive energy for execution. This efficiency compounds, allowing progress to accelerate without additional effort. As language becomes more deliberate, action follows more naturally and resistance loses its influence. Confidence emerges as a byproduct of alignment between words and behavior, reinforcing a cycle where intentional language continuously programs confidence and action. Many people wait for confidence to arrive before they take action, believing they must feel ready, certain, or fearless before they begin. This belief quietly delays progress and creates a false dependency on emotion. Confidence, however, is not a feeling that appears on its own. It is a response to evidence created through movement and effort. Action provides the raw experience that confidence is built upon. Each step taken, no matter how imperfect, produces feedback that trains the mind to trust itself. Without action, the mind has nothing to reference, leaving doubt to fill the gap where experience should be. When action is avoided, uncertainty grows stronger rather than weaker. The mind imagines worst-case scenarios and exaggerates risk, reinforcing hesitation. Taking action interrupts this cycle by replacing imagined outcomes with real data, even when the results are incomplete or flawed. Confidence develops through repeated exposure to challenge, not through mental reassurance. Doing the work, facing resistance, and navigating discomfort teaches the nervous system that difficulty is survivable. This lesson cannot be learned through thought alone and requires direct participation. Small actions play a critical role in building confidence. Consistent, manageable steps create momentum and establish a pattern of follow-through. Each completed action becomes proof that effort leads to progress, strengthening belief in one's ability to continue. Waiting for confidence often leads to perfectionism, where action is postponed until conditions feel ideal. This mindset ignores the reality that clarity and skill emerge through practice, not preparation. Action allows mistakes to become teachers rather than reasons to stop. As action accumulates, confidence shifts from fragile emotion to stable self-trust. Instead of relying on mood, confidence becomes grounded in experience and competence. This form of confidence remains steady even when outcomes are uncertain or pressure increases. Action also reduces fear by normalizing what once felt intimidating. Repeated engagement lowers emotional intensity and builds familiarity. What once required courage eventually becomes routine through consistent execution. Confidence created through action is resilient because it is earned rather than imagined. It withstands setbacks because it is based on the understanding that effort can be repeated. This resilience encourages continued action even when immediate results are absent. Ultimately, confidence follows those who move despite uncertainty and grows stronger with each deliberate step forward. Action reshapes belief, reinforces capability, and steadily transforms hesitation into confidence. Discipline begins in the private moments where choices are made without witnesses. It is not a dramatic display of willpower, but a quiet decision to act based on instruction rather than feeling. When actions are guided by internal commands, behavior becomes stable and reliable regardless of emotional state. Emotional negotiation weakens discipline by turning execution into a debate. When the mind asks how it feels before acting, it gives temporary emotions authority over long-term goals. This internal bargaining delays action and creates inconsistency even when the task is clearly necessary. Internal commands remove ambiguity by establishing non-negotiable standards. Clear directives such as deciding what must be done eliminate the need for motivation. The mind responds more effectively to certainty than to persuasion, aligning behavior with intention. Discipline strengthens when actions are framed as requirements rather than preferences. Preferences fluctuate with mood and energy, while commands remain consistent. This distinction allows progress to continue even when enthusiasm is absent or resistance is present. Emotions are reactive by nature and often influenced by comfort, fear, or fatigue. Allowing them to dictate behavior places progress at the mercy of temporary states. Internal commands override this instability by prioritizing direction over sensation. Consistency is built through repetition of decisive action, not through emotional alignment. Each time a command is followed despite discomfort, the habit of execution is reinforced. Over time, this repetition reduces resistance and simplifies decision-making. Internal commands also preserve mental energy by eliminating constant choice. When behavior is pre-decided, there is less cognitive strain and fewer opportunities for procrastination. This efficiency allows focus to remain on execution rather than justification. Discipline expressed through command develops self-trust. Following through on instructions given to oneself builds credibility and reinforces identity. The mind learns that decisions will be honored, reducing internal conflict. As internal commands become habitual, emotions begin to align with action rather than oppose it. Confidence and momentum emerge as natural byproducts of consistency. Resistance loses influence when it is no longer consulted. True discipline is revealed in the absence of motivation, comfort, or approval. It is the practiced ability to act on command, allowing progress to continue regardless of emotional condition. Before any visible result appears, an internal identity has already been accepted and reinforced. Identity shapes perception, behavior, and expectation long before outcomes are measured. The way you see yourself determines what actions feel natural, what efforts feel justified, and what standards feel appropriate. Self-talk is the primary tool through which identity is formed and maintained. Repeated internal language becomes instruction, gradually defining what you believe you are capable of and what you believe you deserve. Over time, these messages harden into assumptions that guide behavior automatically. When self-talk reflects limitation, the identity that forms is cautious and restrained. Actions align with preservation rather than expansion. An effort is minimized to avoid discomfort or failure. Outcomes then mirror this identity, reinforcing the original internal narrative. Intentional self-talk creates a different identity by emphasizing growth, responsibility, and capability. By speaking to yourself as someone who executes, learns, and persists, behavior begins to shift in that direction. The mind works to remain consistent with the identity it is repeatedly given. Identity acts as a filter for opportunity. When you identify as disciplined, focused, or resilient, you naturally notice and pursue actions that confirm those traits. Conversely, when identity is rooted in doubt or inconsistency, opportunities for growth are often ignored or avoided. Outcomes are the byproduct of repeated behavior, and repeated behavior flows from identity. You do not rise to the level of your goals, but act in accordance with who you believe you are. Changing outcomes without addressing identity creates temporary results that are difficult to sustain. Self-talk also determines how setbacks are interpreted within your identity. A growth-oriented identity views failure as feedback and adjustment. A fragile identity sees the same experience as confirmation of limitation, altering future effort. Consistency becomes easier when identity and action are aligned. When behavior matches self-perception, less resistance is experienced. This alignment reduces internal friction and increases follow-through without relying on motivation. As identity strengthens through reinforced self-talk, standards rise naturally. Higher standards influence daily decisions, shaping habits that compound over time. These habits quietly produce outcomes that appear external but originate internally. Ultimately, who you become is shaped by the language you repeatedly use to define yourself. Identity formed through intentional self-talk directs behavior. Behavior creates habits, and habits solidify the person you continuously grow into. Internal standards act as invisible rules that govern daily behavior, effort, and decision-making. These standards determine what you tolerate, what you pursue, and what you consider acceptable. Long before results appear, an internal benchmark has already been set, quietly directing your actions. When internal standards are low, external results rarely exceed mediocrity. Minimal effort feels sufficient, inconsistency feels excusable, and shortcuts feel justified. The world simply reflects the level of expectation you have accepted internally. Raising your internal standard begins with redefining what is non-negotiable. This shift changes how you approach time, focus, and responsibility. Tasks are no longer optional based on mood, but required based on principle. Higher standards demand greater consistency, not perfection. They encourage disciplined execution even when conditions are unfavorable. This consistency compounds, creating momentum that gradually elevates performance and output. Internal standards also shape how challenges are handled. With higher expectations, obstacles are met with problem-solving rather than avoidance. Difficulty becomes an invitation to improve rather than a reason to lower effort. As standards rise, tolerance for distraction, excuses, and delay decreases. Behavior becomes more intentional, and energy is directed toward actions that align with long-term objectives. This alignment increases efficiency and effectiveness. External results respond to the quality of daily actions. Improved habits, stronger focus, and consistent follow-through naturally produce better outcomes. These changes are not dramatic in isolation, but powerful in accumulation. Raising internal standards also influences self-respect. Meeting higher expectations builds credibility with oneself, reinforcing confidence and discipline. This internal trust strengthens commitment to continued improvement. The environment begins to respond differently as standards rise. Opportunities expand, relationships shift, and responsibilities increase to match elevated behavior. External reality adjusts to the level of order and consistency being demonstrated. Ultimately, external results cannot remain stagnant when internal standards continue to rise. Elevated expectations drive elevated action, and elevated action steadily forces results to grow in alignment with the standards that guide them.